Welcome to the Even Better podcast, where your host, Sinikka Waugh of Your Clear Next Step, brings you exciting content about making communities better by helping people get even better at work.
Hello, and welcome back to another edition of the Even Better podcast. This is your host, Sinikka Waugh, and I am so delighted to welcome you back. Thank you for taking a few moments of your time to enjoy this conversation with me. Today we're talking about yet another of the conversations. We're diving a little bit deeper into one of the topics that came up in the things that I've learned in the 15 years that I've been running Your Clear Next Step. And these messages that had come up in part of this were part of this ongoing message, right? The Even Better podcast is part of our ongoing mission to help us have even better work days, even better days, so that together we can co-create even better communities. The idea, this is my relentless, it makes the people around me absolutely exhausted, but it's a relentless pursuit of, can we be even better today than we were yesterday? Can we be even better tomorrow than we were today? Can we be even better this afternoon than we were this morning? How do we do even better? And one of the things that I want to dive in a little bit on this one is the lesson that I've learned in this journey about the idea that we don't have to be afraid to take up all and only our own space, right? We should, we can, we may, we're entitled to, we're allowed to take up all and only our own space, right? We can take up all and only our own space. And when we think about that, what does that mean? You have permission to take up your space. You have permission to take up your own space, all and only your own space. And I want to spend just a little bit more time unpacking that, because there are a couple of different applications to that. And maybe as you're listening to this, you're going to listen out of a couple of different ears. And maybe you're listening in a workplace context, maybe you're listening in an at-home context or a community involvement context. Maybe this is summertime and you're listening in a get the kids and the family on vacation, or oh my goodness, we're doing one of those family reunions and we're all staying in the same Verbo kind of experience. You have permission to take up your space, all and only your own space. So the first application I want to unpack a little bit on this one is for those who are afraid to take up their own space. And I will tell you that part of me was raised on, there was this sense of being polite. There was a sense of being considerate. There was this sense of, and I believe in this. Please don't misunderstand me. This is really, really important. I was raised with a sense of hospitality and of looking out for others and of putting others first and humility. And I believe in all of these things, right? Putting others ahead of myself. This is important. And I feel like in some cases, there are some people who do this almost to an extreme, almost to a fault, and almost to a point where then they lose themselves. And I want to talk to specifically to those of us or those of them or those who do this, the people who might run the risk of being afraid to take up our own space. And maybe we don't do this intentionally all the time. Maybe there are just certain moments where we find ourselves surrounded by people who are enough, they possess a certain set of characteristics that put us at dis-ease. And so we become insecure for whatever reason, or we become smaller than ourselves and we shrink into ourselves instead of being the selves, the strong, confident people that we know how to be in some circumstances. We find ourselves in other circumstances where we shrink into ourselves. And I want to talk about what that looks like. And in those moments, we almost disappear into the walls. And there are roles Their roles, let's take audiovisual techs, for example, and I love the AV techs at events. Lord bless them. I love the AV magic that happens. If it's a daytime event and the walls are painted khaki, these folks are wearing khaki and they disappear into the walls. You never even know they're there because they work magic. And if it all works well, you never even saw them, right? And they disappear into the walls, and that's part of the behind the scenes magic that makes it all work. And if it's a nighttime event, they're wearing black and they disappear into the curtains and you never even see them, and they're magically making things happen behind the scenes, and that's amazing. And in your personhood, in yourself, in moments, it is still okay to take up the space that you need to take up to do your job. If, as an AV technician, you need a certain amount of space to work and you need elbow room and you need that gawker to get out of the way, then you need to take up your space and invite them to gawk 3 feet to the left. If you need a certain set of tools and resources to do your job, then you need to be empowered. I want to empower you to have that positional power to say, in order to work this magic, this is what I need. I need the khaki pants, or I need the black costume, or I need the things that I need to do to work the magic, to do this positional power that you've asked me to do. I invite you to be empowered to do your job. So let's take that from a role perspective. From a personal power, from who you are as an individual. You were divinely created to be who you are, and you're allowed to take up your space. You are worth your own space. You don't have to shrink into something less than your space. Sit in your own seat. You don't have to take up less than your seat. You don't have to shrink into a corner. Knock on a door if you're supposed to knock on that door. If you've been given a task, complete the task. If you have a question, ask the question. Answer a question. Take a risk. Your space, your person, you are worthy. And I want to empower you in that worthiness to take up your own space. You are allowed to take up your own space. Your feelings are your feelings. Your joy is your joy. I've got someone shared with me a sticker or a little card that's propped up on one of my shelves at home, and it says, don't hide your quirks. Be quirky, and the people who love your quirks will surround you. They'll love you and they'll find you. So let's talk about a different application of this. Because sometimes some people take up more than their fair share of space. And I know that there are moments that I do this. I know there are moments that I am too loud and I am too present and I am too concerned about what I need in this moment that I forget. I forget what others need. And that's not okay. So when we look at the other side of this, so it's okay to take up your space. It's not okay to take up more than your space. It's not okay to take up someone else's space. So this is where the application of emotional intelligence comes in. It's about being considerate of others. When my kids were growing up and we would stay in hotels, we had this phrase that we would use: be aware that there are others here, right? Be aware that there are others here. Pay attention. You are not alone in this hotel. So if at our house you can run around and stomp your feet and jump up and down because we're the only ones in the house, in a hotel you don't run around and stomp your feet and jump around because you're not the only ones there. There is someone, if you're on the second floor, there is someone beneath you who might not want to hear the jumping up and down. If you're in an airplane and you're a kid, you're not kicking the seat in front of you because there is someone in that seat in front of you, and you're kicking their seat is taking up more than your space. It's taking up their space too, and that's not, you don't have a right to take up their space. We got to be considerate of others. And it is not fair of us to demand grace or tolerance or acceptance from others if we are not also willing to extend grace and tolerance and acceptance to others. So let's go back to that airline seat or a movie theater seat. If I've got an armrest on both sides, I don't deserve both of those armrests because there's a person on the other side of me. I get one or the other, but not both. We figure out who gets one. I don't deserve both because I'm sitting in the middle. If I've got two legs, I don't get more than my space in front of those chairs. I don't get to spread out and take two of the seats on either side of me, I get my seat. It's okay to take up my seat, but it's not okay to take up my seat and both of theirs. I can take one or the other, but not both. If I'm walking in a workplace aisle and I stop to have a conversation with someone, that's okay because I'm entitled to have a conversation, but I'm not entitled to disrupt someone else's work. I'm not entitled to block the passageway so no one else can get through. I'm not entitled to interrupt someone else's work because I want something right now. It's up to me to pay attention, to look around. Who else is working here? Who else is trying to get stuff done? Who else is trying to get through? My awareness of who I am should not prevent other people from wanting to do what they want to do. So this is where I got to realize that it's not all about me. It's not all about me and what I want. And maybe I'm disgruntled. Maybe I'm annoyed. Maybe I saw something that I didn't like. My opinion is not the only one here on earth. My perspective on things isn't the only one that matters. There are other people too. It is okay to take up my space. My feelings are my feelings. I'm allowed to be annoyed. I'm allowed to be frustrated. I'm allowed to be hurt. I'm allowed to be sad. It's okay to take up your space. It is not okay to take up more than your space. So I don't get to let my frustration or my anger or my whatever ruin someone else's day or block someone else's passageway or deprive someone else of their joy. I don't get to let my cloud of noise, remember in the Peanuts cartoon with the little guy who would walk around with a cloud of disgruntlement over his head. I don't get to let my cloud of disgruntlement over my head cause someone else to be miserable. That's not fair. I only am responsible for me and my space and being aware of how me and my space impacts other people. I'm not responsible for your attitude, right? I'm not saying I'm now burdened with the responsibility of your well-being because that's not it either. But I don't get to ruin your day just because I stubbed my toe this morning. That's not right. I can take up all and only my own space. So when we look at this in a business context and we look at this in a workplace context and we look at those, this is why I work so hard at making sure that we're putting the good of the organization first, right? When I am helping people put the good of the organization first, it's not about what my team needs or my department or my budget would prefer this or my process would prefer this. What does our organization need? Maybe this is easiest for me and my team, but what does our organization as a whole need? I am not the only wheel. I'm not the only cog in this wheel, right? I'm not the only piece of this organization. What do we need collectively as a whole that helps this whole organization succeed? Maybe it's not easier for me to do this particular process this way, but as a collective, this is what's better for us as an organization. This is what's better for our customers who we serve in the long run. So it's not fair for me to take up more than my space. I need to be aware that there are others here. So let's look at a third application. And I think there's one more that we can do, especially those of us maybe who've been around a little bit more, those of us who are looking for ways to give back, or maybe those of us who maybe are having a better day. Maybe there are spaces where you can see things from a different perspective. You're having a better day, someone else is having a tough day, or maybe you've had the opportunity to grow in this space that someone else hasn't had. Maybe there are ways that you can co-create greatness and help others take up their space. Maybe you can help empower someone to take up their space, and maybe you can help someone take up their space instead of someone else's space. So what would that look like? What would that look like? If you see someone shrinking in and you see someone, this shows up pretty often. I've seen it more times than I care to count in a round table discussion. So we're sitting around a table and we're having a meeting and I see or I hear someone speak up. And very often it is a woman who has spoken up and she is not heard. And someone talks right over her. Often, not always, often it is another louder voice who has spoken over her. She is a softer spoken woman. Either a louder woman has spoken over her or a male voice has spoken over, and she is not heard. And she speaks maybe once, maybe rarely twice, a second time, but she shrinks back into herself because she has not spoken up. So what do? Maybe you notice it, and maybe you can say, hey, I thought I heard you say something just then. Wait, you guys, to everyone else at the table. Maybe you can lend your voice to that quieter voice at the table. And you can say, wait, I thought I just heard her say something, or I thought I just heard you say something. Pause for a second, you guys. What were you saying? Could you say that again? And invite that quieter voice to speak up. Invite that quieter voice to speak up, male or female. Invite that quieter voice to speak up. What did they say? Invite them, lend them your energy, sit next to them and let them speak up. Let them speak up. Lend them your energy, lend them their voice, let them speak up. If you hear someone who is spoken over or spoken down to or cast aside and they don't get a chance to take up their own space, lend them a little bit of your energy, a little bit of your space, and let them be empowered. Help them be empowered. Give them a little bit of positional power to take up their own space. Wait, you had a question there. If you are a leader and you notice that someone's not asking you questions, maybe they're afraid to ask you questions. Maybe you come across as pretty busy and not available and inaccessible. Make yourself more available. How do you make yourself more available and accessible so that you can invite those questions? And you can say, wait, I understand that you should have questions, or you might have questions, or you would want to have questions. How can I empower you to ask those questions so that they can take up their own space and they can ask you those questions? Invite them, empower them, tell them you want to hear those questions. Give them framework for those questions. Give them a starter kit. You might have questions like this, and this. In your shoes, I might have questions like this, and this. Help them speak up. So on the flip side, how could you help someone if you feel like they're taking up more than their first space? Sometimes we get involved in a conversation in a hallway or in a passageway or a conversation in those. Let's start with the hallway passageway conversation. You're in a workspace and we've stopped to chat, and from where you're sitting or where you're standing and you're chatting, you can see someone else trying to come down the passageway, and the person that you're talking to has their back to that person, and they simply can't see. You can do something. You can maybe gesture with your hands, hey, let's move a little bit, or you can pull them forward, or you can step back, or you can say, hey, wait, I think someone's trying to pass. You can use verbal clues or physical clues to physically help someone take up less space so that someone else can get by. That same idea can be applied to the work that we do, to the conversations that we have. Hey, we haven't heard from so-and-so, or hey, it feels like spending this much time on this conversation is preventing us from getting to this topic. Let's set this aside for a minute so we can move over to this. It feels like we're spending so much energy and so many dollars on this topic, we're not getting over to this. Should we shift a little? I'd like to hear from so-and-so. It feels like so-and-so is trying to raise their hand. We can shift the conversation when someone else is perhaps taking up more space than is theirs to take, and someone else is trying to get by. Similarly, if perhaps someone is using a louder voice in a context, maybe we're not blocking a passageway, but our vocal intonation, some of us have voices that simply carry. Some of us are aware of this, some of us are less aware. Some of us, when we tell stories, we get animated and we get louder when we get animated. And some of us know when we're getting animated, and some of us, we get so animated we forget to pay attention. Well, maybe that's happening. Maybe you're in one of those conversations and you realize, oh, oops, sorry, I got loud. Oh, sorry, we're getting loud here. Maybe you can use it as an I got loud, or a we're getting loud, or simply soften your own voice, and that might help the other person to soften theirs. Simply by doing little steps like this, we can lead others around us to help take up less space, to stop taking up more than our own spaces. Again, I want to get back to that first point. We have permission, each one of us, we have permission to take up our own space. What we don't have permission to do is take up more than our own space. We can't go taking up someone else's space. That's not fair. That's not right. Each of us is entitled to take up our own space. And so I invite you to step into your space, to find joy in your space, to take that positional power that comes with the title that you have, with the divinely created human that you are. Step into your space with joy. Step down from taking over someone else's space. And when you have the opportunity to lift someone else up, to help them take up their space, or maybe help them take up a little less space than too much, find a way to do that so that together we can co-create greatness around us. I hope this is useful to you. If you have any thoughts, please join me on social media or reach out to me on my Facebook or on LinkedIn. I would love to connect with you. And so many of these things come up in our courseware on Changemakers. We've got a regular cohorts running really regularly on Changemakers. This is our attempt to help make the world just really a better place, one community at a time, one workplace at a time, one person at a time. Our Changemakers cohort is really all about helping people grow in 3 key disciplines, because changemakers, those are the people who help change stick in their organizational context. And they do 3 things. They put the good of the organization first. They make authentic human connection, and they treat change as a process, not an event. And these ideas, they'll show up in that class, in that courseware in there. And if you'd like to learn more, I encourage you to reach out to us at Your Clear Next Step. In the meantime, I hope that you've had just a wonderful day, and I hope that these few minutes will help the rest of your day go even better. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for tuning in today. The Even Better podcast will be back with more content soon. But in the meantime, subscribe to our podcast or check out our website at yourclearnextstep.com for more information. See you next episode.